to the ocean, and that would serve as a mikveh. That would serve as it'll purify the item from its contamination. And we had a whole discussion in the Gemara. It's a ring of an animal. How does it receive contamination? That was the whole discussion of the Gemara. Yeah, 52b1. Then the Gemara yesterday, V'tovlim Komam, in the first column, it says that you don't have to remove the collar from the animal when you take it to the mikveh. So the Gemara had a question. We take it to the ocean. So the Gemara had a question. Shouldn't it be a chatzitza? Shouldn't the ring that's attached to the collar, the ring that you put the strap through, shouldn't that be considered an interruption? That it's going to not allow the water to go through to cover the whole collar? So the Gemara answered that's what the Gemara said. The Ika chatzitza. Amar of Ami. Now we're on the right column, 52b1. Misherit Khan, that when you hammered it out, and therefore the ring was no longer, the little ring that was attached to the big collar was no longer attached, and therefore it was loose and there was space for the water to go through and through. As we explained, the little ring sometimes came off, sometimes wasn't always on. If it was always permanently on, then it would be like one. It would not be considered an interruption. That's what we said yesterday. Then we ended yesterday that the old question: how was this collar, this thing that was wrapped around the animal, how did it receive contamination? We said generally that jewelry of a person, Moshe, right? Your watch could receive contamination, right? But jewelry of an animal, we said it's not part of the laws of receiving contamination. That it cannot receive contamination. So how did this item receive contamination? So we had two answers in the Gemara. We had Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha gave one approach, and Rabbi Yosef gave another approach. So Nafcha said that our Mishnah is talking about it originally was made for around the neck of a human being. And while it was made for a human being, it received contamination at that time. So that's why if it received contamination at that time, so the contamination continues. The fact that now you changed it from being used for an animal, for a person, now it's being used wrapped around the neck of an animal, it's still you still have to deal with the contamination now. It's still right. Nothing was done with the contamination, and therefore you are you have to figure out how to remove the contamination. That was the approach of Yitzchak Nafcha. Rav Yosef said that you don't have to say that the Mishnah is talking about that it received the contamination while it was a jewelry for a person, right? Mordechai, right? Rather, what does Rav Yosef say? He says, since you use this collar that you wrap around the animal also to restrain the animal, therefore it's considered the use of the person. And we say something that a person uses, that's called the keli, it's utensil. Utensils receive contamination, right? Your metal plate and your metal cup, all those things receive contamination. Okay, those are the two approaches. And now the Gemara says, Lemer of Ami ki Rav Yosef Srile. Let us say that Rav Ami holds like Rav Yosef. Now Rav Ami, because the Rav Yitzchak, let's take a look at the right. We had so we had let's take a look over here for a second. Right? Because Rav Ami, where does Rav Ami come into the play? Right? Rav Ami just, let's look at the Gemara. The Gemara said, "V'tovlim b'mekomam," right? It says you put into them, you're able to, the animal could go into the ocean without removing the collar that's on the animal. So the Gemara is the question, "V'ike chatzitza." Then we have the question, is something interrupting it? Something that's the small ring is blocking the water from going to the outside ring. So Amar Rav Ami b'shavitchan. Rav Ami, he's the one who said that you went ahead and you hammered it in a way that it's loose, that the ring that goes onto the outside collar is loose, and therefore the water could go. And how is it loose? Because you banged the outer ring collar, and now it's loose. It's wide. So the Gemara says, "Lemer of Ami ki Rav Yitzchak." Let us say that Rav Ami, whose position is Rav Ami? Right? We have two rabbis that explained how it became tameh, right? Two rabbis that explained how the item became contaminated. And we had one rabbi, Rav Ami, who explained why the small ring did not serve as an interruption to the outer ring. And the way he explained it was by saying he beat the outer ring, the outer collar that went around the neck, and by beating it, he widened it, and therefore the little ring is loose, and therefore it's able to be, the water could go, right? Is that what we said? Everyone got the steps? We got to get everything clear. We have different rabbis giving two different approaches of how the item, who's now it's on the collar of the animal, we see on that. What's the history? How did it become contaminated, right? Two approaches. Either approach one, it was originally, while it was jewelry for a person, it became contaminated. Approach two, because it seems it's being used for a person. If you want, you can make yourself comfortable over here. Let's see a beautiful face. You come even closer. There we go. You said Birkat Torah already? Remember to say Birkat Torah. So we have two approaches. The Mishnah states that this collar, this thing that's around the neck of the animal, with a little ring inside of it with a rope, this thing became contaminated. Tameh. How? That was the question. Two different rabbis gave two different approaches. One approach, because it became contaminated while it was jewelry for a person. Second approach, it became contaminated not because while it was a person, jewelry for a person, came contaminated because even though it's serving an animal, but it's also serving the human being. But the fact that you could restrain the animal by pulling it, it's serving you. And if it serves you, it's like any utensil that can receive contamination. But then the Gemara says, okay, you gave me the history how to become contaminated, but there's a problem. But when the animal goes into the ocean, there's a little ring that's attached to this big ring, and that little ring should prevent the water from going through onto covering the whole surface of the big ring, the big thing that's around the neck. That was the Gemara's question, and the Gemara answered. Rav Ami says, you know what the story is? You had banged that outside ring, and it's very loose, and now the ring became wider. It became wider that the smaller ring that's attached to it will now not be so strongly, it's not really strongly attached to it, and therefore it's able to go ahead and the water will cover the whole surface. So the Gemara says, this answer of Rav Ami, that you went ahead and you hit with the hammer until you widened the hole of the ring, and therefore the water could reach the whole, the total surface of that ring. That the Gemara says his answer, it seems that he's going with the approach lamer of Amik Rav Yosef. Do we say that he goes with the approach of Rav Yosef? Rav Yosef says that the collar could receive contamination while it's used just for the animal. While you're using it for the animal, it could receive contamination because it's considered a utensil for you. Because the Rav Yitzchak Nafla, because if he holds like Rav Yitzchak, according to Rav Yitzchak says that If you have a regular collar around the animal, it will not receive contamination. And the only reason why it receives contamination is according to him, the only reason why it received contamination because it was a jewelry for a person, but not a jewelry for you for an animal. Not because it was used for the animal, it was used for the person as jewelry. Because kivan de ritchan, if that would be the case, if the reason why this item received contamination is because of its history, because of its past, not because of present, not because it's being used for a person now to restrain it, to restrain the animal, but because it was once contaminated when it was used for a person. So then the Gemara says it should not no longer be contaminated. Why not? Kivan the ritran maaseh. When you beat it with the hammer, and now you widen that outside collar, that ring, and now the space for the small ring and the outside ring, that it's not interrupting the water. That was an action that you did in the ring. So once you did an action, you should say that the tumah, you did a change, you did an action, so the tumah should leave. That's the Gemara's question. If the only reason why it's contaminated because of its past, so then the past should have gone, should have went poof, went away, it should have went away. What do you need to go to the mikveh? Why do you need to tovel it in the mikveh now? What do you need to deal with with the contamination? The contamination should have been over because you banged it. The Gemara says, Kivin de ritran, since you widened it, avad b'humaisa, you did an action that should remove its status from being tameh. Because when you go ahead and you widen this, you bang this outside, this ring on the outside, no longer is it
collar.
say it again?
I think it's called the collar. No?
Collar. So this collar is no longer fit nice for a human being to wear. As long as it was not beaten with the hammer to widen it, your human being could wear it. Once you've beaten it, right, Adam, and now it's no longer, so that's a change. That's an action, change, and that change, the Gemara is thinking, should change the status of the item without mikveh. You change it. Why? Where's the precedent? Because the Gemara says, Kivan, the Ritran, Avivu Maaseh, you did an action. And Parchala Tumah Minayu. Morning, Dr. Rosa. The Tumah, the contamination, should have left. How do we know that? It's not. We learned in the Mishnah and Kalim. What did Mishnah say? Kol Kalim Yordin L'dei Tumah B'machshava. If all utensils could become tamei through your thought. What does that mean? If, let's say, you're manufacturing a utensil, you're doing something, you're making a utensil, and I think Rashi gives there's like a example. Let's say you had an example, you wanted to make something you're making leather, right? And then you decide now really you plan on making shoes. Usually the common thing, you're gonna use the leather to make shoes. So while you're in the middle, you process the leather, you decided, you know what? I'm stopping at this point. I'm not gonna make shoes from this. I'm gonna use it for a carpet. Right? Of some sort of, or I'm using it for some sort of service. I don't know if the carpet is a good example, but I'm using it for some sort of mat. I'll use it for a mat. A serving mat, this leather piece of leather. So then it's already complete. You complete the item is complete because what's the rule? When you're in the manufacturing process of an item, it's not receiving contamination during that process because it's not complete. The utensil is not done. Once it's a utensil, with the product that you have a product, that point it reaches contamination. But if any point of the way you already had in mind, okay, I'm leaving it as this, in this stage of utensil,
It's all clean.
and I'm having use for it, that will make it already tamei. It's done. the utensil. Now I made it complete, Dr. Rosa, by saying I want to use it as in this state. Now that's Yordan. They when I don't plan on doing another step in the process, it goes ahead and it receives contamination at that point. However, if I go ahead and to leave that status, that it has the ability of, remember, it's a utensil, it could receive contamination. But now, if I want, how would that item that's matte lose the opportunity to receive contamination? If I would just say it again, determination. No, right. The thing is like that, right. When if you're making leather shoes, a leather coat, and while you're in the process of making the leather coat, a dead mouse came in contact with it, or if someone passed away in the factory and it's under the same roof, would those materials, those items, would they become contaminated? Did they receive contaminated? Contaminated. Contaminated means tum'ah. There's something called the Torah says there's something called there's a contamination. There's something that was tum'ah. Tum'ah is a certain type of spiritual Moshe concept that when a person, let's say, comes in contact with a dead body or in a tent with a dead body, all the people that are in the tent become contaminated. Right? You know what, Moshe, a Kohen can't go to a cemetery.
Right. Kohanes cannot go.
Say it again?
Any Kohanes can go to cemetery.
They can't go to cemetery. They can't go into the building, into the chapel where the dead body
What if they do?
What? Okay, so what if they do? So they did something wrong. They did a sin. But if they do, it's a sin. Sin is a big word, right? It's a big word. Hate is a big word, right? But what they do is, but they now became contaminated. Now they have on them a state of, now if they want to go into, now not only a Kohen becomes contaminated if he goes into a cemetery, a person becomes contaminated. But if I'm not a Kohen, I'm allowed to become contaminated. I'm allowed to do that. But the Kohen can't. What is a person now? When you
Even for his parents?
What?
Even for his parents?
So only for his 7 relatives. His father. He goes to the funeral. His 7 relatives. Let's see what. I'm not sure about the cemetery, but he goes to the funeral of his father, his mother, his brother, sister, his if he has to show him he lost a child, or a spouse. His wife.
Wow.
Those 7 close relatives, he goes to their funeral. What's that again? Haskara. There's no Haskara. There's no.
Oh yeah, it's true.
There's no dead body at the Haskara, right? But Haskara is like the Shloshim. What do you call it? The 30 days, or the week, or whatever it is. And the sister, the Torah says that, that wasn't married. He's contaminated to a sister that wasn't married. Now, what does he do? The Torah has something to remove the status of contamination. There's something called the Parah Adumah, right? They have this special law of this. There's a certain process to go in and remove the contamination. But now there's another way of removing contamination without the process of the Parah Adumah. Now, what would remove the status if you do an action? If you did a certain action in the item, what's the case? It's none. We said, "Kol kelim yordim le'tuam mashava." Here we're talking. All kelim can become contaminated. Has the ability to. Now there are certain times that a utensil cannot receive contamination. It can't receive contamination. When can't it receive contamination? It's not complete. A utensil, right, Mordechai, am I clear?
We buy a flea from a boy and we cannot fit it because for certain reasons we dismantle it and we build it again. So it's not quite heavy. So breaking it and putting it up to another keli? Is it the same way?
So I would have to look into the halacha, but once you broke it, it should be that now it's no longer, it should, good morning, should have lost the status. I'm gonna have to look up in the halacha, because that breaking, now you did a maaseh. And when you broke it, it wasn't usable anymore. Kola Kelim, good morning, Nathan, welcome back.
Morning, good morning.
So we're saying, Nathan, that all utensils, we said, could have the ability of receiving contamination. That if you manufacture utensil, once you had in mind, I'm using it at this point, now it's able to receive contamination, even though you could take it to a second stage and keep on building it. Like we said, Nathan, if you're making leather shoes and you decided, you know what, instead of reaching the level to making the leather shoes, I'm just going to stop it as a leather mat. So we said that it could receive contamination at that point. Now, if you want to go ahead, good morning, Asaf. The ein olen v'tumatan, and it does not lose its status of contamination. Ela b'shinui ma'aseh. Now, what does that mean? That when you have utensils that are fit to receive contamination, right? If you go ahead and you had this leather that you made a mat out of it, a placemat out of it, and now if what's going to remove, if you change your mind and say, you know what, I don't want to use it as a placemat anymore. I want to go ahead and now I want to make it as a shoes. Having mashava, having the thought to change it, and now I'm saying it's not a finished utensil is not enough. I would have to go in and take a knife or something like a scissor and cut it. And by doing that or doing some sort of action in it, that would go ahead and change its status. And now it would not be able to receive contamination until you finish the product. Okay, until you didn't action it. So too, if a person it says, if you had a mind to use any item before it received its normal type of completion, you want to use it as is at stage 2, and then it will not lose its status until you start doing a actual malacha. So included in this, if you had to go ahead a tachshit hamyuchad la'adam, something that's designated for a person, and now if you go ahead, now we're saying, the Gemara is saying that here also, if we had over here in our Gemara something that became contaminated while it was used by a person, while this collar was around the neck of a human being, it became contaminated. But subsequently, when you banged it, that action of banging it, you did a shinui maaseh. You did an action in the outer ring, and then you put it on the animal. It's no longer appropriate for the person to wear it. So that action should go ahead and remove its status of contamination. And the fact that Rabbi Ami says you did this action and it's still contaminated, he says you banged the outer collar, and therefore there's no chatzitza, there's no interruption, and yet you have to take it to the ocean. Why you have to take it to the ocean? You did an action. The answer is because Rav Ami obviously holds that, like Rav Yosef, that even it's still able to receive contamination even after you did an action. And even though it's serving the animal, but since it's serving you, because you could restrain it by pulling the collar, therefore it can be able to receive contamination. Because if he holds like the other rabbi, if he holds like if he holds like Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, that the only reason why this item can have, if it's around the neck of the animal, the only way it could receive contamination is because of the human being's history, because it's history that it was used for a person, it was jewelry for a person, but as is, it will not receive contamination, right? The rabbi who says, you know how it received contamination? Because it was used, bone was used as jewelry for a person. He's seemingly saying, but if it would not have that history of being used for a person, the fact that it's being used to restrain the animal, that's not enough. Because it's generally, maybe he holds that it's only sometimes, it's only limited use of the restraining. He doesn't say that it's enough of a category that it's called a utensil of a person. He doesn't identify it as a utensil of a person. But he says something that serves the animal does not receive contamination. Something that serves the human being receives
Can
contamination.
somebody mute, please, or everybody mute, please?
So that's what the Gemara wants to suggest. The fact that Rav Ami says an action was done.
Ralph, you need to mute. Ralph, mute.
The fact that Rav
Sure.
that he said an action was done and it's still subject to contamination, it seems to be that he holds like Rabbi Yosef, that the fact that you sometimes will pull the collar to restrain the animal, that's called usage for a person and receive contamination. Now, so the Gemara shoots back, no proof. And therefore we will, this would lay, if we have two rabbis on the same team, right? That will lend itself to halacha, right? If this rabbi agrees, if we could deduce and infer and say, you know what, Rav Ami holds like Rav Yosef, so that will shed a lot of light on that halachic question. Meaning, if we'll have a halachic question, can this share that's around the neck of the animal, can it receive contamination as is without a history of becoming contaminated by the person? Can it receive contamination? So Rav Ami would definitely hold that it could receive contamination, even though it has no history of becoming contamination by the person. But just by the fact that it's around the neck of the animal, you could sometimes use it to not just for jewelry, not just for, but to restrain the animal. That's good enough to receive contamination. The other rabbi holds that's not good enough to receive contamination. So it's a very big question, and the fact that Rav Ami seems to line up with Rabbi Yosef's opinion. My father-in-law, Rabbi London of Blessed, would say you have to line up the men. We're lining up Rav Ami like Rabbi Yosef, and therefore there'll be a lot of there'll be a great halachic. We could say perhaps that the law would be that it would be subject to contamination when it's around the neck without a history of because it was contaminated while it was around by a person. So the Gemara says no proof. Why? Because it's possible that he holds like a Yitzchak Nafcha. That it's possible that he holds that around the neck, if you have something just used around the neck of something that's around the neck of an animal, it's a collar around the neck, and the fact that you sometimes use it to restrain is not good enough to make it contaminated, the ability to be contaminated. But rather, he holds that the reason why this item around the neck of the animal, this necklace around the neck of the animal that's used sometimes to restrain, is contaminated is because it has a history. Because while it was used for a person, it became contaminated. But then you can ask me the question, if while it was used for a person, it became contaminated, and that's why it's contaminated today when it's being used for the animal, and you have to bring it to the ocean. But when you're going to ask me, but Rabbi, it should not be contaminated anymore because you beat it, you knocked the hammer, you widened that ring with the hammer, you did a maaseh, and it's no longer nice for a human being to use, so it should have lost its contamination, right? That's what you want. That was your question. So I'm going to tell you that type of beating and action he holds is not an action that could remove it from contamination. Even though we said that when you go ahead and you do an action, we gave the example, the leather. When you're making leather shoes and you said, no, I want to stop it as a mat, now it has the ability to receive contamination. But once you go ahead and if you start to change your mind, I want to know, I want to make, I need shoes. I ran out of shoes. I want to make this mat. I need a coat. I want to make a leather coat, leather jacket. You have to go in and do an action. If you go start cutting the material, that action loses the status of a mat. It's now lost its status. It's no longer, and therefore it's no longer contaminated, or no longer has the ability to be contaminated. But when it comes to, in this situation, when this type of, when you're fixed, he holds, Savala Rabbi Yehuda, the Ama Maseh L'Sakein, an action that you do an action to fix the item is not considered lav ma'asehu. It's not considered an action to ruin that's going to take away the status of contamination. So therefore, this, when you beat it and you beat this ring for the purpose, good morning, Nathan. This collar, you beat the collar because you wanted to put it around the neck of the animal, and that is not enough to remove the status of contamination. He likes to do it the old-fashioned way. We're talking about history. He has a history in order high of that. There's a very good history of that. The Tanya, we learned in a Braita. You like that, Adam? The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Lo amar shinui maaseh l'takein el l'kalkel. Only when you go ahead, when you do an action and the action ruined the item. Let's say the case Mordechai that you gave. You had a utensil and you took it apart. And that taking apart ruined the item. It's no longer useful when it's apart, let's say. When it's broken apart, and then you have to reassemble it. But when it's broken apart, that action, it removed this, it's not usable, right?
Is there a difference between breaking a clay jar, which is not redoable, versus something you take apart but you could snap back together?
It could be something that you mean when you have sections of something, right? That's a good question. Sections the question if sections are considered a real break. That's your question. I'm not.
If it was designed to be taken apart
And
you
put
take it apart, it's
right.
no longer a container, but you could snap it back together. And the question is, were you able to remove the tuma or not by unsnapping and then resnapping?
Right. It's a good question. I mean, that's a research. It's a research question. We got to research that. Yeah, it's like now give me homework over the weekend, right? So Rabbi Yehuda said that only lo'oma tishina ma'aseh l'takein elo t'kalkel. The only time the rule that a change of an action removes the utensil from the status of a utensil, and therefore no longer receives contamination or remove the contamination, that's only by a thing that's breaking the item, but not by something that's actually fixing. And this when you widen this collar to be put for the purpose of the animal, and this was a tikkun, this was something beneficial thing. It never lost its status of tumah, and therefore that's why it has to go to the ocean, because it could have received its contamination while it was used for a collar for a person, a jewelry around the neck of a human being, and received its contamination. Even though you subsequently beat it with a hammer, and now it's no longer useful for a person as necklace for a person, but that beating of the hammer was not an action of destructive, because that made it ready for an animal. That action of widening it for the animal, and therefore it still has that contamination, and that's why it has to remove its contamination. Masnisa Tani, the Braita, we have a Braita, another answer to the question. We had a question. The question was that how could you take this animal with this collar around its neck? How could you take it to the ocean to dip it and to act as a mikveh on this item if it's a chatzitza? Right? The Gemara's question was there is a chatzitza. There is the small ring that's attached to the outer ring should interrupt the water from covering the whole outer ring. So the Gemara says that b'mechulalim. We're talking about the way they made it from the beginning. The beginning they made it very wide, that they did not tightly place they left it on in such a fashion. So that's how they made it. They made it without tightening the small ring, right? You have the small ring to the outer collar you put the rope in the small ring. But that small ring was not attached tightly. It was the way they attached to begin with was very, they made it in a way that it was very wide, and therefore that's why the water could come through. Because it's not you didn't need to go ahead and subsequently bang it with the hammer. Like the Gemara, that was one answer, you have banged the hammer. The new answer was the way they made it from the beginning, they made it with a lot of space. Okay, I want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat, and we'll be back on Monday. You're welcome from Eretz Yisrael. What's the name?
Gil.
Gil?
Gil.
Gil from Eretz Yisrael. We're here every day, Bez Hashem, Monday through Friday, 6:45.
Thank you.
You ever want to?
Rabbi,
We'll take you.
Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yes, Ralph, how are you?
It's not coming in the Zoom properly. I can't even see you. I only see myself.
You know what? Because the video was maybe, I don't know why it was closed.
I didn't want to disturb you, but
Anytime you can ask me that, I'm pressing the
see,
video, and it's not, what's it, Adam?
I don't see it.
See,
Oh, there you go.
now I go. I'm sorry, Ralph.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Ralph.
All right.
Anytime you can always mention, that's not an interruption.
Yeah. I wasn't. You were going pretty fast, so I
Okay.
didn't want to interrupt you. All
Okay.
right. Shabbat shalom.
You too.
See you on Monday.
Yes, looking forward. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You read Hebrew? Yes.
Take care, Ralph. Take care, Saf. Oh, let's see.
Get off.
That's the good.
There you go. All right, there you go.
What's that?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Wow.
The what?
Good to see you.
Take these.
Oh,
Thank you.